Okay, a bunch of you want to know about posing your characters. I did a demo in Tuesday's lab. If you're watching this for Thursday's lab, I'll do a live demo there too. But of course, it's easier if you have a video to follow because you can scrub through, see the stuff over and over again. It's always good to take notes though, especially because you might be picking up skills really quickly. But I did want to record a quick little video to show you how we can pose our characters, spending as little time as possible. Of course, there's a right way to do it. I'm doing it the quick way. This is a very, very rough intro to some of the basic rigging tools in Blender, and they go really deep. Rigging is a whole profession. People spend their entire careers just rigging, so something to keep in mind with that. We're going to go into preferences, and we're going to make sure we're in add-ons and that we have something called Rigify turned on. So Rigify is a series of built-in rigs, and it sort of saves you a lot of time. You can, of course, do this manually by hand, but what Rigify gives me is now when I go into the armature menu, that's Shift-A to get down here, and we look at this, we see a human meta rig, and this gives us like a bunch of joints and bones, includes things like fingers. I'm going to skip fingers for now because it works the same way as everything else. It's just fingers are time consuming to set, as are the face controls. Instead, I'm going to go armature, and I'm going to do basic human meta rig. So this is just going to give me a basic rig because all I'm going to use this for is posing my character. If I want to get a facial expression, I'm going to sculpt it. If I want to get hands in a position, I'm going to sculpt those. I'm just using this to get the main limbs and everything put together. It just makes posing easier. Of course, I could use sculpting tools to pose the character, just a little bit more time consuming. So I'm going to go Alt-Z to give me my X-ray mode. Also this little see-through button up here. Hit S to scale this up, and what I'm going to do is take my armature here. You'll see it's called Meta Rig. This means it's the rig that makes rigs. And I'm just going to drag it until I feel like usually about the shoulders lining up is what I want. The head I can adjust, but I kind of go feet to shoulders is what I base it off of. And now I need to make some changes to these joints so that everything else lines up with what I'm working with. So with the rig selected, we're going to go into edit mode. And here I can move around and rotate the joints to get them into the right position. But what I want to do is make sure I come up here in this little butterfly option and turn on X-axis mirror so that I'm keeping it the same left to right. Now, maybe your character is asymmetrical, but probably their skeleton isn't. So we want to keep this relatively together. I'm gonna kind of click and rotate. So if I go to the end of the finger and I control click, at the end, it'll let me rotate the whole thing. And if I go into period, which is my pivot, I can do active element, which means it rotates around the last thing. So if I start here and go down here, it's going to rotate around that. If I start here and go down to here and select this joint last. So you see I kind of shift click on that again. It's going to let me rotate it from that place. And that's a nice way of getting things lined up all together because we kind of know that the elbows and the things should line up. So let's get it from the side now. It's going to move it back a little bit to get where the arm should be. Look at it in position, kind of rotate a little bit. A lot of moving around in 3D space. My main goal here is to keep all these joints inside the body as much as possible and lined up relatively where things are. This is going to be for the hands. So this, I'm just going to put all the way down to the end for the fingers. So kind of where the fingers are, this whole thing will control the hand all as one thing. Let's look at this now from the legs. The legs are also an area that needs some TLC. So I'm going to start with this little guy. This is sort of a heel pivot. It lets you pivot on the heel. So just G, using middle mouse to control the direction it goes in. And then I'm using R and Z. It's kind of like supposed to be perpendicular to the back of the boot. It's just something that helps you twist the foot a little bit better. Now I can take the rest of this leg, making sure that this is yellow, meaning it's my last selected thing. And I can rotate it. And then R and Z to sort of twist the whole leg's opening so that I'm getting it lined up with the boot. That's kind of how I like to do it. I like to do the whole leg because the leg tends to rotate. Like I don't really want my ankle or my knee rotating. Like this shouldn't be rotating in the Z axis or anything like that. It wouldn't be really accurate. Another thing we can do to really make some of our rotation work well is if you set it to local instead of global, it tends to pivot around the spot it's in. But let's take a look. Just give it a little bit of rotation. The knee should come a little bit forward. That's about right. And I could take things like this ankle, just put it up at the ankle. This is sort of the ball of the foot here. This would be where the toe is, so let's put it there. Let's put the ball of the foot sort of like kind of where you imagine your toes are, like where it should pivot from. Should be something like that. Let's move these. I'm going to say G, Shift Z, so that moves everything. I can just kind of eyeball it and move it with only those two axes. Again, this is just the process of making sure things line up. Then let's get the head. I want to move this to the top of the head, and I want to move this right to the bottom of the neck. This is going to be my head joint, and so this is where the neck is going to rotate from. And so like I kind of want to think about where the spine is. Now if I move these off of each other, that becomes a problem. So there's a little one inside, and I want to collect them together. And this is sort of the base of the neck, where the base of the neck rotates from. So it's the top of the spine, the base of the neck. I want to get a nice action there. I don't need any joints that you don't need. We can always get rid of. Like I don't need those. This is pretty good. This is the clavicle, so that's kind of like right here, and it's where our arm rotates from when it gets up. So that's in a good spot. And this one is connecting our shoulder, so that's also in a pretty decent spot. So when I kind of got this and everything's where I relatively want it to be, I'm gonna go back into my object mode. And let's make sure we take this rig and we're gonna select the rig. And again, before I dive too deep into that, I am working with my low poly. This is a good looking like low poly. This is actually very low. So 12,000 is a really low vert count for these days for a character. This is something I could easily run on a mobile game or something like that. If you're looking at like a game like God of War, they're like in 120,000 verts and things like that. But this is like, again, wanted to go pretty low poly, keep it pretty simple, so it's running really well on a lot of different hardware. Older games, you would see like they're running somewhere as low as like 5, even like 3,000 verts for a character. But that's like, and if you go like the PlayStation area, we're talking like hundreds, like under 1,000. But we're not there right now. So just want to show you that, my wireframe. And other notes about this too is my character, if I look at my face orientation, and I look at any of these individual parts, it's all inside. So like you can see the red inside. This is all one-sided as much as possible. And I've only kept the sides where it's really necessary. So I've gotten rid of any extra faces that I feel like I can get away with. It just makes everything a lot easier. Okay, so now that I've done that, let's take our meta rig and we're gonna convert that into a full rig. I'm gonna save this, I'm gonna keep it right there. Also a good idea to save your project right now. There we go. If you ever get that error message that just popped up, can't save with an @ it means like I hit save too many times, or it was actively saving and I was trying to save. You just wait a second and save it again until it gives you that blue message that lets you know it was okay. So I'm going to take this meta rig, and in its properties, I can come down here to this little running guy symbol, and there's a thing in Rigify buttons called generate rig, and that's exactly what we want to do. I pressed this and something immediately happened. It's tiny. It's not the size I want. It's because this meta rig is scaled, and so it's basing it on its 1:1 scale. So I have to control A, all transformed, so this is all zeroed and frozen out. Now if I generate rig, it's right on top of my character. So this comes with a bunch of controls, and what these do is if I go into my pose mode, I can select any of these controls and move them, and you see it's moving joints. It's not moving my character, and it's not moving the meta rig because none of these things are hooked up together. So I'm gonna hide the meta rig because I might need it later. I might want it for if I don't like how this rig lines up or a joint. I can always come back to it and regenerate a new rig from here. But this is a pretty good start for what I need to do with my character. So nothing's hooked up yet. What I want to do is hook up. These controls are driving a bunch of joints, and I want those joints to drive my character. Again, rigging is a very deep subject. There's a lot going on here. It's essentially we're creating vertex groups that the bones are rotating around. A joint is just a pivot. If you want to know more about this kind of stuff, check out MI347, where I do a lot more on animation and rigging, and we get into how this works. But it's like a whole world into itself. And a whole course really needs to be dedicated to this kind of stuff. We're just trying to pose our characters. So what I want to do is get the definition rig. And just because I used it so much, I know it's this one right here. You can confirm that you've got the right one by looking at what it's called. It should have a DEF that means definition. It's the definition rig. It's the rig that controls the definition of the character and what it looks like. So if I rotate these, this is the one that I want to connect up and rotate to the character. I won't end up posing or editing these at all. I will, however, like the controls we pose, will move this will move the body. Having that layer of detachment makes it easier to control, again, as you'll see in a second. So I just want to make sure everything else is off and I leave this one on. It's very important. So go back into object mode. And now I want to, I can select all of these at the same time. I can select them one at a time. I'm just going to hit A to select all. And I'm just going to hold shift and click on my rig. So now called rig, not meta rig, because meta rig is just our temporary rig to make a rig. And I want to click on this. So this is yellow. So this is my last selected thing. And I'm going to parent it with Control P. And you'll see that it now gives me options that say armature deform. If you didn't select those in the right order, for instance, if like this was the last selected item, and I hit Control P, you'll see there's no armature deform there because my active object is not an armature. So I just need to make sure my active object's an armature. And we're going to look at these options. We're going to do with automatic weights. This means that Blender is going to do its best job to try to assume what we want. It's going to be fine. There's going to be things we want to fix, but it's actually going to get us most of the way there with most of your models. Again, this assumes that you've placed your joints in relatively good spots. A little tweaking can be done here, but this is supposed to just make it relatively easy to pose our characters. So automatic weights, I'm going to post it. Always a good day to save before. Just give it a second to run. It looks like it's done. And now, if I'm staying here, if I look at my character, in our vertex groups, you see it's got all of these different groups, and this is every single joint. It's basically saying it's being driven by all these joints. And if I click this, I can just click kind of any one of these controls. These are also in our item. There's a new rig layer properties, which turns on and off things. So I'm going to turn on the torso, the arm IK, and the leg IK. There's also an FK system, but that's not turned on at the moment. We're just going to do everything with these IKs for this. Again, IK-FK switching, something you'll learn a lot more if you take my animation class. So let's just get this out of our hidden mode, and now let's pose our character with object pose mode. So now what I have is if I hit G, we can see I can move this character's arm, and I can rotate it. And this gives me a lot of controls if I want to twist the arm's position, or kind of like lets me twist the angle the arm is at. So this is pretty nice for being able to set up and pose our character, something that would be a lot harder if we didn't have all these controls. I can always reset these too by hovering when I'm selecting, hovering over. And as either zeroing them out, or if I want to undo, for instance, a move, Alt-G will do that. So I can hit R to rotate, Alt-R undoes a rotate. You can scale them. It's weird. I usually don't recommend that. It's not really designed for it. So like get a little pose for my character. I can pivot her hips down a little bit, maybe move her foot, slide it back, rotate it out. This is where some of those other controls like really help us. Like this is now like a pivot for the foot. So I'm gonna kind of pivot the foot up. Wow, way too much pivot. So RZ, let's pivot back a little bit. This is like, just play with the controls a little bit, see what they do. So like a little rotation. Something you might want to turn on is a little widget like this, because we can actually choose specific axes to work with, which is nice. Twist the head. And like kind of twist up the neck or something like that. Maybe having her looking up a little bit. So just, grabbing the controls and doing a little posing and positioning. As we can see here, I've got a couple problems with like the weights aren't exactly lining up and everything the way I want. Like sometimes you'll get like a little cross weight, like it's moving some parts of the hair and things like that. But that's okay, because I'll show you really quick how we can make some adjustments to that. Let's rotate this knee out, maybe move this, trying to create a good balance, move this foot forward or something. Again, nice thing about these kind of controls. Okay, so let's say I like this overall pose. What I can do now for my character, and I would do a file save as, so we'll create a new version of it and call it your posed version because you're going to save over it. What we can do is when we have our character like where we want it, I'm just going to select all of it, shift select it, and I can do like we can do like our instanced reel. We can like apply this, and so we can hit Control Alt P, and we're going to do clear and keep transformation. So now this is all just still in position, but it's all based on our transform. So I can actually come back in here and do something like on the hair. Whoa! Hit the wrong button. I hit my tilde, which just does some wild stuff. So let's say G, and let's select just the hair here, like hair low, and be on my, let's go back into object and sculpt that. So like we could take something like this and position it, and then if I want to add, you know, more dynamics or like get her hair moving out, like I can just kind of sculpt that into place. And since you've already unwrapped it and everything, we want to unwrap before we do this, everything will kind of fit into place. And actually I don't need I can hide my rig. But this is going to let me, you know, just kind of tweak and play with stuff. But as you can see, it gets me the pose for my character a lot quicker than I would have otherwise. I think they changed, I'm in Blender 3.0, they just changed some of the settings for the switch object. It used to be D and they changed it to something else. But so I'm just kind of going through, and as you can see, I'm making some adjustments. Like some of the stuff got hollowed out or put through. And I'll just inflate that to push them apart from each other. And then we can make like minor adjustments to stuff, like if we want to give her, you know, an asymmetrical expression. You know, don't forget the, I'll turn off my mirror mode. And we just kind of mostly push points around. To get something interesting here. So there you go, a quick way you can pose your characters. They'll stay here, they'll render out, you know, they'll look nice if you throw a little light at it. That's my sort of my base textured character. Let's see, I'm in cycles. Pop that into Eevee. Probably why I was running so slow a second ago there. Eevee, let's go into object mode. And let's toss in a light or two. Love a good area light. And it's going to be way more dynamic than having a character just like kind of stationary T-pose. So, under 20 minutes, you're looking for how to pose your character. That's how you do it. Again, we can always kind of pop in, and now that it's posed, we can add sculpts. But always make a separate version of this, a duplicate. I could even duplicate my low poly and call it posed or something, because you always want to have a backup version of whatever you're working on. Anyway, good luck. Can't wait to see everyone's final projects. Remember, this whole thing, for this semester at least, is optional. I'm not going to be grading you on having a pose or not. It's just for people who want to have one. All right. Can't wait to see the finals, everybody.